In the 1850s, Missouri was our western frontier. Those seeking riches in California, Oregon, and New Mexico launched their adventures from the westernmost Missouri towns of Kansas City, Independence, and St. Joseph, the last vestiges of civilization before entering the great American desert. The question of slavery was no stranger to Missouri. The state entered the Union under a cloud of concession between Northern and Southern politicians, creating the Missouri Compromise in 1820 and the infamous Mason-Dixon line, which made Missouri the northernmost state allowing slavery. Initially, slavery had not been crucial to the state's growth as it had been in the Deep South.
Sometime in the fire.
But by the 1850s, the peculiar institution was on the wane in the southern states and on the rise in Missouri, especially in the area known as Little Dixie, along the central Missouri River, where the cash crops were tobacco and hemp.
The culture of hemp was found to be more profitable, more so than cotton in the South. At that time, Missouri contained 100,000 slaves, so the abolition of slavery would have involved the destruction of productive capital estimated at $50 million.
The large Missouri plantations generally held hundreds of field and house slaves, but the typical slave owner only owned up to 4 bondsmen. More often than not, though, the Missouri farmer worked side by side with his slaves. Nevertheless, the opinion of much of the South and Missouri was that owning slaves was a God-given right and tradition. Violence towards slaves was a constant threat, and the idea of freedom for most slaves was a desperate dream.
In Missouri, many owners treated their slaves so humanely that they never ran away, although they were sometimes punished. Others felt really grieved for it to be found out that one of their slaves ran away. And others allowed their overseer to treat their slaves with such brutality that they were forced to run away.
Strong pro-slavery man as I am, I saw a sight as I rode out of Independence, Missouri, that opened up my eyes to the cruelty and barbarity of the institution. A slave dealer rode by with his drove of Negroes collected for the southern market. One unfortunate creature broke loose, running for life and liberty. He was nearly to the culvert when the master raised his firearm, fired, and the fugitive fell dead in his tracks. It was a brutal deed done by a brute. But the law sanctioned it.